Charles Starkweather was born in 1940 and grew up in the modest farming community of Lincoln, Nebraska. The uninspired environment of his childhood was compounded by the fact that he was bow-legged, wore glasses, and stood only 5'2" at the age of 17. In addition, Starkweather was constantly teased by schoolmates for his dark red hair, as well as his unapologetic emulation of screen star James Dean. Desperately seeking to find his place in society, Starkweather dropped out of high school and found work as a garbage man in 1957. But his self-described black moods, coupled with his continuing James Dean obsession, resulted in unpredictable and violently antisocial behavior. Starkweather began carrying a rifle with him wherever he went and habitually shouted curses to total strangers from his garbage truck. Starkweather's only solace was his relationship with 14-year-old Caril Ann Fugate, which quickly became threatened by the Fugate family's intense disapproval of the red-haired garbage man. On December 1st, 1957, Starkweather's inner frustration with the world finally became too much to bear. He spontaneously held up a gas station in Lincoln, abducted the 21-year-old attendant, and drove him out onto the wheat fields to calmly murder him with a single shotgun blast. Starkweather's mental instability was energized by the senseless, motiveless killing, and 7 weeks later he paid a visit to Caril Ann Fugate's home. Caril Ann wasn't at home, but her mother, Velda Bartlett, and stepfather, Marion Bartlett, were. They got into an argument with Starkweather, demanding that he put away his .22 caliber hunting rifle. Starkweather responded by blasting both Velda and Marion to death. When Caril Ann later arrived home, she stood mutely by as Starkweather grabbed her 2-year-old sister, choked the child to death, and purposefully discarded the body in a cardboard box. Caril Ann then went to watch television as Starkweather made some sandwiches and posted a sign on the door saying, "Stay away. Everybody is sick with the flu." After 6 days of turning away relatives and neighbors, suspicions were aroused and the pair fled in Starkweather's car. When the vehicle became stuck in the mud only miles from Caril's home, Starkweather walked to the nearby farm of an elderly hunting companion, August Meyer, and upon sight of the man gunned him down in cold blood. Starkweather and Fugate then robbed the farmhouse of guns and money and struck out on foot for the nearest highway. While hitchhiking, they were picked up by a pair of local teens, Robert Jensen and Carol King. Starkweather pulled a gun on the couple and directed them back to the Meyer farm, where they were led to an abandoned storm cellar. While Fugate remained in the car, Starkweather shot Jensen 6 times in the head and then raped and butchered Carol King. Desiring a change of pace, Starkweather drove to a huge estate he had seen on his garbage route, the home of wealthy Lincoln industrialist C. Lauer Ward. There, the young Starkweather engaged in yet another cruel murder spree of stabbing and shooting, which claimed the lives of Ward, his wife Clara, and their housekeeper. By this time, the police had been called to investigate the mysterious quiet at Caril Fugate's home and found the bodies of the 3 slain family members in 2 sheds behind the house. Suspecting Starkweather at once, law officers fanned out in the area, only to uncover the second massacre scene at the Meyer farm. The merciless, frenzied manner with which Starkweather had dispatched his victims sent a collective shudder throughout the community, and with the discovery of the Ward family slayings, officials realized that no one was safe from this mad dog killer. Local schools were closed, and the National Guard was summoned to aid in the search for Starkweather. Meanwhile, Charlie and Carol had stolen Ward's expensive Packard and headed for the state lawn. Fearing that the car was too conspicuous, Starkweather pulled over near Douglas, Wyoming, and hastily attempted to steal a parked car after killing the napping driver. Another motorist happened upon the spectacle and was soon engaged in a life-and-death struggle with the desperate killer. During the brawl, a sheriff's deputy pulled up, and before he could intervene, young Caril Ann, who till now had been a passive witness to the incident, suddenly ran screaming to the officer for help. With this, Starkweather bolted from the scene and a high-speed chase ensued. When a police bullet shattered the rear window of Starkweather's car, he received a minor cut from a fleck of flying glass. Fearing that he was mortally wounded, he immediately pulled over and was taken into custody. Officers were amazed at such a cowardly display from an otherwise cold and ruthless killer. Once news cameras appeared on the scene, Starkweather rallied, however, and began to faithfully project the defiant, cocksure manner of a restless teenage rebel. Initially, Starkweather declared to authorities that Caril Ann had nothing to do with the killings, but when the senseless rash of murders earned him a death sentence, he claimed instead that she had been a willing accomplice. Meanwhile, Caril Ann kept emphatically insisting that Starkweather had forced her to accompany him on the bloody murder spree by threatening to kill her family.
Did you ever break down and cry and beg Charlie to let you go or anything like that?
Yes, I cried all the way.
Now, did you get on with him for quite a while?
Yes, I went with him a year before, and then I told him I didn't want to see him again, but he came back. And after that Sunday, I went with him, and then I kept telling him to leave. And at that Sunday, I told him to leave, and I told him I didn't ever want to see him again.
Why, what had brought you to this conclusion? Why didn't you want to go with him anymore?
I think he's crazy.
Do you think that Charles got what he deserved when he was convicted to the electric chair?
That's not my place to say.
During the trial of Caril Fugate, defense lawyers continued to press home the notion that the 14-year-old was nothing more than an innocent hostage throughout the ordeal. However, jurors were made uncomfortable by Caril's completely cold and detached manner, and the revelation that she had held victims at bay prior to their executions. Starkweather's testimony was damaging as well, as he cited an incident at a roadside diner where Caril mused, "Those hamburgers were lousy. We ought to go back and shoot all them people in that restaurant." In the end, Caril received a guilty verdict and a life sentence for her part in the 11 slayings. Starkweather lamented the outcome by stating, "It's a shame. I would have liked to have had her sitting in my lap when they put me in the electric chair." The execution of Charles Starkweather took place at midnight in the Nebraska State Penitentiary on June 24, 1959. Just prior to the event, Starkweather was asked if he would like to donate his eyes for transplant after death. True to his character, he sneered, "Hell no. No one ever did anything for me."
There was really no way that I could really stop it. He was a madman.
After years of maintaining her innocence, Caril Fugate was paroled in 1976. She remains haunted by the nightmare.